What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. So last night UFC 311 went down and we have a lot to talk about. I'll go over my takeaways, the fights to make, and then I'll talk about the UFC 313 card. Pereira versus Ankalaev and Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker. So let's start with Peyton Talbott losing as a minus 1200 favorite to Raoni Barcelos. Would I call it a fraud check? Absolutely. I mean, when you're an undefeated prospect with that much hype, you just can't lose like that. I think he got taken down 8 times. Controlled for 10 minutes in a 15-minute fight. Really poor performance from Peyton Talbott. Maybe you give him a striker next while he improves on his grappling. But as Islam says, send him 2-3 years to Dagestan and forget. Because that grappling we saw last night wasn't up to par. Next, to start the main card, Reinier de Ridder got the first round submission against Kevin Holland. I did expect RDR to out-grapple Holland, especially when you look at Holland's last couple of fights and RDR's credentials with the judo. But I wasn't expecting a first round submission. You do have to question Holland's activity and heart, especially looking at the last couple of fights. I'd rather see Holland fight 2 to 3 times a year, put on 100% performances, rather than fighting, 5 times a year with these lackluster fights. And in terms of who they fight next, I think Holland has to go back down to 170 pounds. At 185, his grappling really isn't comparable to the top guys. And at least at welterweight, he's got a good frame, good reach. He can strike with a lot of the top guys, apart from maybe the Wonder Boys and the Prochazkas of the division. As for RDR, maybe you give him someone like Apollo Costa. Costa is really well-rounded, but he has lost 4 of his last 5 fights. And RDR, he does deserve a step up, someone in the rankings, so this would be a good test for him. Going up to the next fight, Jailton Almeida got the first round TKO against Sergey Spivac. Now, I won't talk about this fight for too long. Almeida did his thing, but I do think he deserves a top 3 heavyweight. I think John Jones will probably retire in the next couple of months. He won't do the Tom Aspinall fight. So Aspinall likely gets promoted to undisputed. And I think they'll do Aspinall versus Gane for his first undisputed title defense. So it makes sense to do Volkov versus Almeida next. Now, Yuri Prochazka versus Jamal Hill. What a great fight. We got a new mythical fighter unlocked in head movement Yuri. He was moving side to side, pulled counters like he was prime Floyd Mayweather. And he dropped Hill, I think, 2 or 3 times. Now, was his defense perfect? Probably not. His hands were still low at times. He was getting hit with some shots. But absolutely a better performance than his last couple of fights. And in terms of what's next, I'll start with Jamal Hill. I think you do Hill versus Roundtree next. Maybe 5 to 6 months from now, once they're both recovered. But this would be a really good fight between 2 southpaw power punchers. Hill, he is coming off the loss to Yuri. Khalil, he's also coming off a loss to Alex Pereira. But it was a pretty impressive loss. So I think this would be a really good title eliminator bout. Now as for Yuri, I think he fights the winner of Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg. Blachowicz and Ulberg, they're fighting in roughly 2 months. The time frame does align. And Yuri, he probably won't get a title shot anytime soon. Especially with Pereira and Ankalaev fighting in a couple months. I think Yuri needs at least 1 more win. The winner of Jan and Ulberg would also need 1 more win. So it's the perfect next matchup. On to the co-main event. Merab Dvalishvili, what a fighter. What a champion, man. A lot of people are counting him out. I mean, I picked Umar in my predictions video. But Merab silenced all the doubters. He did start a bit slow. Umar was defending the takedowns early in the first 2 rounds, landing those kicks and the straight left hand, but you could sense the tide was about to start changing, and it really did in the 3rd round. I mean, Merab was swinging those big right hooks, backing Umar up against the cage, and as soon as Umar would back up, Merab would go for the takedowns, either a single leg or a double leg. He wouldn't get a lot of those takedowns, but it was the constant pressure and suffocation. And then in rounds 4 and 5, absolute masterclass in domination from Merab. He continued the combinations, the right hand. He got more takedowns and single legs. I mean, he absolutely broke Umar down in those last 2 rounds. And he was showboating too. Now, what's next for Merab and Umar? Well, I'll start with Umar. I think he should fight the winner of Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong. I'd love to see Umar versus Sean O'Malley next. But let's be honest, the UFC is not sending their cash cow straight into a fight with Umar right after the first loss of his career. I think Cejudo and Yadong can give him a hard fight. Henry with the wrestling, Song Yadong with the striking, but I would pick Umar to win both those fights. Now for Merab, you've got 2 good options in my opinion. Petr Yan and Alexandre Pantoja. Now Yan, he is a top contender at bantamweight, coming off 2 really solid wins in Song Yadong and Davison Figueiredo, but Pantoja is a very dominant champion at flyweight. He's cleared out a lot of the top contenders, the Royvals, the Kai Kara Francis, Brandon Moreno, Manel Kape. He's very deserving of a 135-pound title shot. Now, what do I think will happen? I think Pantoja will fight Kai Kara France, probably in April. So I would do Merab versus Petr Yan. And then lastly in the main event, Islam got the job done early against Renato Moicano. Now, I do think Islam started a little shaky in the first 2 minutes. I don't think he got dropped. It was more of a slip. But his striking wasn't on par to what we've seen maybe in the Dustin Poirier fights or the Alexander Volkanovski rematch. But once he got Moicano down, we knew this fight was a wrap. He got the ground control, the Darce choke, and that was it. Now, I know Moicano doesn't do much for his legacy, especially compared to Arman Tsarukyan, but this win should make Islam Makhachev the lightweight GOAT. I mean, most lightweight title wins. He's one short of Anderson Silva's record for most consecutive UFC wins. I know Khabib was a bit more dominant, but Islam's definitely accomplished more in the UFC. And as for who both guys fight next, Moicano, he's got two real options here. Either you rebook the Beneil Dariush fight for April or May, or you do the Paddy Pimblett fight. You know, Moicano, he wants money. He's getting a bit older, so I actually prefer the Paddy fight at this stage of his career. You know, it'd be very competitive with their grappling exchanges. On the striking, they're both very average, so I want to see this fight. And as for Islam, I do want to see the Arman Tsarukyan rematch. You know, I think Tsarukyan has the best chance in the division of dethroning Islam, but Dana White has said that Arman won't be next for the title. So you probably do Islam versus Oliveira next, maybe Arman versus the winner of Gaethje and Hooker, and then wait to see how Shavkat and Bilal plays out. So maybe Islam moves up to welterweight to end the year. But anyways, now that we've talked about UFC 311, there was a big announcement last night with UFC 313. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev for the light heavyweight title, and Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker is a 5-round co-main event. I'm going to talk about Pereira versus Ankalaev first. You know, this is the fight we've been needing for the last year. And no offense to Yuri or Khalil Roundtree, but Ankalaev can actually mix it up, unlike those two. Now, will Magomed actually mix it up? That's a different question. He has said he's going to go out there, just strike with Pereira, and I don't think that's the best game plan. You know, Pereira, he's going to chop him down with those leg kicks. Jan was able to chop down Ankalaev, so Pereira can definitely do it. You know, he's the more technical, accurate striker, especially with the left hook, so there's a good chance Pereira clips Ankalaev. Now, if Ankalaev does mix it up, he's got a great chance of winning the title. You know, the game plan to beating Pereira is the grappling. I'm not saying Ankalaev is a bad striker, but his advantages are definitely on the ground. You know, he's got decent takedowns, solid ground control. He was able to 10-8 Jan Blachowicz in the 5th round of a title fight. So if he can grapple Pereira, or at least mix it up really well, I would actually favor Ankalaev just slightly to win by decision. Now, Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, 5-round co-main event. It's going to be an absolute war. You know, Hooker, he's on a career resurgence, coming off wins against Jalen Turner and Mateusz Gamrot, whereas Gaethje, he is a bit past his prime and not exactly at his best. I mean, he's coming off the Max Holloway KO and a 1-year layoff. However, I do favor Justin. You know, I think he can do to Dan Hooker what he did to Rafael Fiziev. You know, land that thudding jab, the right hand left hook combination, maybe some uppercuts. You know, Dan will have some good volume, but I do favor the power punching of Justin. So I would go Gaethje by a 4th or 5th round late TKO. But yeah, that was my UFC 311 recap, fights to make, and my UFC 313 breakdown. Since TikTok is back, I'll be posting on there daily, but I'll also be posting on YouTube pretty much daily as well. If you're new here, like, subscribe, and thanks for watching, guys.